There is so much we want to talk to him about, but first let's just start with the CBDC question. Where are we on that here in the U.S., and how far out front is China?
Well, the U.S. is, I think, sort of on the sidelines, doing some good work, doing research. But if you think about the rest of the world, China is actually leading the way. China has been working on a pilot since 2014, working on its central bank digital currency, has already sort of had millions of transactions, millions of wallets, and has an array of pilots that are in the hands of people testing out smart contracts and programmability of money. So they actually have data that they're iterating on, and they're helping other countries with standards and collaborating on CBDC to CBDC transactions. So I'd say we're behind, although it doesn't mean that it's a race where we have to do exactly what China's doing, but the conversation globally is happening, and China is well positioned to influence that conversation.
How concerning is that from a security perspective, given your background on that and on counterterrorism and some of these other issues? You have special insight into this.
Yes, and I think the backdrop to this is that there's really a geopolitical context to all of this, and we have to make sure that we're not losing the forest for the trees. The geopolitical backdrop is that around the world there is now, I don't know if it's a race, but there's certainly a march towards finding alternative ways for new digital financial infrastructure, basically how to do cross-border transactions in a way where you're not relying the same way on traditional banking infrastructure. That's happening, whether we want to like it or not. And it's not just China. Of course, China has its project, but other countries in the EU, the UK, Japan, other parts of East Asia are all trying to figure out a way to innovate with payments. Now, the geopolitical implication there is if there is an alternative financial infrastructure, if there are new rails and the U.S. doesn't have the same influence on that, it is not sort of at the table when new standards are being laid, then that impacts U.S. economic statecraft. Sanctions, the ability to sanctions, the potency of our sanctions power comes from the centrality of the U.S. to the financial global infrastructure. So if that shifts, even if it shifts a little bit, doesn't mean that China is going to take over or that the yuan is going to displace the dollar. But if there's a viable new rail where sanctioned actors can now transact, that's trouble.